Oh my gosh, this is the best ever. Okay, so Christi Paul, CNN anchor, is going to join me, and I apologize for no makeup. I'm on vacation, and it was jammies and no makeup day with you all, and it makes it so much fun. But we just realized the problem with Christie's connection was she was on her computer phone, so this should work. Y'all are so patient. There she
Seriously.
is!
That's what all
Oh my
people like. I just can't. I can't with all like Christmas and everything. And I'm going, why can't I get live on this thing? What is wrong? I was using my computer. Apparently, I need to use my phone. I don't even know this because I've never gone live. Lynn, thank you for your love and support and wonder.
I am so excited that your first IG Live is with me. You look so gorgeous.
You're very kind.
I was explaining it's Vacation IG Live. So we're going a little throwback to my very first IG Live where I did no makeup, and it's so much fun. I was explaining to everyone. I was explaining to everyone why I wanted you to come on, because Christy started something called the Reset when all of this went down. And I'll let you explain what it is, but it just inspired me a lot in readjusting my mindset when it came to how we were going to spend this year. And so why don't you explain to everyone what the Reset is first?
Okay, so the Reset is, I think, really at the end of the day, what all of us did. We just hadn't defined it. And I've been talking to a lot of people about what has changed for you. I mean, COVID was devastating. People lost people in their family that they love and friends. Some people have been out of work. Some people have had to move back home with other family because they don't have a way to support themselves now that they've lost their job. There are cities that are devastated, as we know, but all of this has worked in some way to help us readjust and to look at our priorities and maybe make shifts where those shifts needed to be made. It is hard to reconcile that when you've lost somebody and it's been nothing but painful for you. And I am sensitive to that, and I understand that. There were a couple of weeks ago, I was on Facebook, and it was like 3 or 4 or 5 different people talking about that I know, talking about people that they lost just in a matter of a couple of days. And it's almost hard to even absorb that. But what I have learned in my own life is that pain teaches us. It's not that the pain is okay. It's not that what happened is okay. But this is to be buried by our pain and by what has happened around us. We could not control this. To some degree, yes. I think there are arguments to say that we could control how expansive it became. But at the end of the day, this was something that happened that we didn't have control of, and we need to be kind to ourselves and to other people. So I've talked to a lot of people to just ask them, what has been the priority shift for you? What has changed for you? And the overarching theme that I have heard from everybody, from Bob Goff, Martha Beck, from Marianne Williamson, is we needed to get back to valuing human life and people and respect and dignity, because the last several years have kind of felt like everything just went off the rails. So, we've learned I learned about forgiving. I learned about slowing down and just going home. As Bob Goff says, sometimes the answer is just to go home. I learned about faith and truth, about intention, about what a new normal is for us. And I wanted to just start with something that Martha Beck said, because when we are stuck in isolation, when we're stuck at home by ourselves, and even if it's crazy at home, if there are other people there, we're stuck in our own heads. And that can be a really dangerous place to be, because we are not kind to ourselves. We will judge ourselves. We will pick apart what we're doing. We will think we're doing it wrong. We will say we're going crazy. And then when we do that enough to ourselves, we start to then perpetuate it outside ourselves. We become judgmental of other people. angry with other people. But really what that is, it's a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. So that's what we need. That's what I've learned. We really need to be conscious of if we want to make that change. And Martha Beck talked about truth, because when you're stuck at home and you're in your own head, truth is what I think we look for. Mm-hmm. And she said the truth might hurt us. You know, maybe there are truths we have to face that we just haven't faced. And they may hurt us initially, but that's where we find freedom. Is when we're honest with ourselves. So she talked to me a little bit about how she said there's something all of her clients do, like literally hundreds of her clients. There's something, and I'm going to use my own example because she used this as an example. My first marriage, my husband was an alcoholic. I didn't want to admit it, and it was abusive, and I didn't want to admit it, and I didn't know if it fell into the parameters of what abuse really was. I didn't know it at the time. I do now. But to hear that, you know, I ran from that truth for 4 years because I didn't want to face it. And that's what we do. She said her clients run from the truth. And the best part of fixing that is to just say it out loud. She said she has had all these clients who she will look at them, and if it were me, she would say, your husband's an alcoholic, and it's not okay that this is happening to you. And she said, it sounds like, yes, bad news. But if in that moment somebody says, thank you, because you know what? You were acknowledged. What is the truth might be hard, but living in that truth is so much easier, because then you can find a remedy. You can start to climb back up of that abyss that you feel like you're in. So Martha talking about how we need to find the brave, we need to find the courage to face the truth, because that's when the healing starts.
You know, if nobody has read or picked up or knew about Christi's book, I highly, highly recommend it. It's called Love Isn't Supposed to Hurt. It is about your first marriage. It's also about your courage to find your own truth. And it was it was before I even knew you. It was incredibly inspiring to me. We have the same TV agent, and I read it and I reached out to him and I said, will you please tell Christi Paul that she's changed my life? And then when I finally met Christi, I could fangirl and just tell her how amazing it was for me to read this book. So I just highly recommend it to everyone to pick up if you've been in a relationship or been in a dark place and you don't know how to get yourself out of it. That is possible. The other thing I also thought of when you were talking about how challenging COVID has been is, you know, you have this positive outlook and it's all your mindset, but you've been through it in a difficult way too. I mean, Pete, your husband, he had COVID and has lingering effects of it. I mean, you were touched so closely by all of this. And I said from the very beginning, you know, we can't control what's happening, but we can control how we react to it. It's kind of something I think about in life all the time. How did you do that when you also still had to go into work every single weekend, when you still had to be on as a mom to these 3 amazing girls? How did you do it?
By the grace of God. Balance. I mean, I had, there were a couple of days I had total meltdowns when it first started. Actually, I couldn't go into work because they wouldn't let me come into work because I potentially had been exposed. It was by the grace of God that none of my children nor myself got it. But my husband is, you know my husband. He's a strong, beer drinking, construction, hockey playing kind of guy.
That's right. We both married the same man.
And he loves people. I mean, his heart really is, he takes care of people. So when I saw him down, I don't start crying, just thinking about it. I mean, it was hard to see him like that, to go. I mean, I was bringing him his food every day, checking on him. He never, thankfully, had to go to the hospital until the very end. He seemed to get better, and then for like 2 days he was just sitting up, and he was back and kind of to his own jovial self, kind of minus 10 times or something. But he came down in the morning and said, you got to take me to the ER. And I didn't ask questions. We just went, and his heart was racing. Like his resting heart rate was like 130. And he couldn't get it to come because he wasn't doing anything. He couldn't do anything. He was still out of it. And I got to the ER and realized, oh, I can't go in with him. And he kissed me goodbye, because we had done all of these stories on the air of people saying, all I did was drop off my dad at the ER. All I did was drop off my mom, and I never saw them again. And it was the first time. I will say thank you so much to Chris Cuomo and Sanjay, because they talked me off the ledge a couple of days. You know, Chris had it, and thank God he really just had a great perspective. He just kept saying, you're going to get through it, Christi. He's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And he understood everything that I was talking about. But I sat in that car in the parking lot and just bawled for like an hour and a half until I could compose myself to come home to the kids, because I didn't want them to be worried. And my pastor just happened to text me while I was in the car about something else, and I called him, and we're praying in the car. It's just the kindness of people to get through that, and to recognize. I tried very hard to recognize that this is hard, but we, you know, as Glennon Doyle says, and I love her, we are made for hard things. You know, we are stronger than we think we are, and we are braver than we think we are. And I have people who have lost spouses, and I have often thought, oh my gosh, what would I do without him? Not just because I can't function. We know that we would go on. We know that we would function. I would be heartbroken. So it was one of those moments where I said, I definitely had a priority shift. People, I mean, yes, my career is so important, and I'm trying really hard now in the midst of newscasts where we're talking about chaos and craziness and just really horrible things happening in places in the world. I'm trying to inject some hope, because I think that's what we need so much right now. And Jane Seymour told me when I talked to her about the reset, she said, you know, she wants us to not live in fear. She said, I understand that you will feel fear, but I don't want you to live there. And she was so right, because we even, you know, it's scary around us, but sometimes we let fear in, and I'm learning to make that shift, because I am a fearful person, as you are. We work in a business where we talk about horrible things all the time, and horrible things happening to children, and my children, they probably think I'm off my rocker because I'm like,
oh my gosh. Every scenario you can think of, I'm thinking of. Like, we go to the park and I'm looking for a tree might fall. I mean,
or I'm looking for a molester. I mean, yeah, I'm looking at everybody.
Totally. I'm like, who in this crowd is trying to kidnap my child?
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a byproduct of this crazy job. It's really challenging.
Yeah. And Jane was really good about saying, you know, about trying to be that live in the present moment. And I will tell you, that is what this has really taught me, because I look ahead. I look ahead at my kids going to college. I look ahead at retirement. I look ahead at where are we going to be? What are we going to do? Or how are my parents going to be? And I spend so much time there that I don't spend time here. And so I have shifted when I have those moments of starting to think about something that really I have no control over in the future. I just take a moment and I think about where I am. Like, as Bob Goff said to me, I can't remember how he said it. You stand in the grass that you're standing on, or you be in the place that you're standing on, because his whole thing was slowing down and going home. And he said something to me that I loved, and I'm going to read that to you because I have it here for you. He said, everyone I've ever known who has chased and accomplished an ambition knew that some days were about gathering strength instead of exerting it. Sometimes, you know, we are in go, 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 go. We've got to go. We've got to do the next thing and be the next thing and have the next thing. And we don't. I mean, sometimes if you want to get there, you need to rest here. You need to reprioritize here. You need to decide what really matters to you. And he was talking about how we can't control anything. We don't take time to just be. And and that it's normal for us. He said, you know, you grab for things that are floating when the ship is sinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the chaos of it. But I always say, in the silence is where we find our strength. Until we sit down and just be with ourselves and really be honest with ourselves about what we want. Like, okay, yeah, I want this, you know, big house, but why do I want that big house? Yes, I want this much money in my account. Well, why do I want this much money in account? Yes, I want this job. Why do you want that job? It's either because normally, yes, we can like nice things. I'm not saying that. That's just part of human nature, I'm sure. But I think a lot of it, I know for myself, it stemmed from insecurity because we think it gives us worth. And we forget that we are worthy just as we are. Matthew McConaughey said something on Oprah years ago that I have never forgotten. She asked him, how do you manage the enormity of the star that you are? You know? And he said to her, well, first and foremost, I know I'm a child of God. And if we all knew that, like really understood our worth, so many of the things that we put value in that don't really have value at the end of the day that we can't take with us, they would just kind of melt away, I think. And I'm learning to let that melt.
I think that actually answers the question that one of the viewers had about how do we reset our mindset, right? Like part of the reset is adjusting our expectations and adjusting the things that, you know, we've had in the past or the way that we've done things in the past. But it's also, there's a role in parenting and educating our kids on how to do that also, because this is hard for us, right? Like the things that you're describing, we've all been thinking about, and it's hard for us to get there. What is the role as a parent for you in teaching the girls the same, because they're facing a ton of disappointment and not being able to be with friends, not being able to go do the things that they would normally do, and they're at the age where they really realize it?
Yeah, and there are kids that are really suffering. I know some parents who've talked to me. One mom said her 11-year-old is in therapy because she's just shut down. She doesn't know how to, she's an only child. She doesn't know how to manage all of this. Another mom was telling me her child literally has a bald spot because she's pulling her hair out. We need to be very aware of the love and the support that these kids need. With my kids, we actually sat down with them. I mean, yes, they were disappointed. There were a lot of things that got canceled for them that they were looking forward to, a lot of things.
Oh, the camp.
I know, my daughter, this camp, she's been talking about it for a year. And well, for both of them, one of them couldn't go to her camp. The other one neither of them could go to camp. And it was what they were looking forward to so much. But we said, you know, if this is the biggest problem you have in life, you're lucky. I remember saying to my eldest daughter when she was having an issue at school with something, I said, you know, you haven't had a ton of adversity in your life. We have had to deal with many deaths. I mean, they've dealt with many more family deaths than I had by the time I was young or older, but there hasn't been a ton of adversity for them. And we go through the whole adversity teaches you. It is a moment that wakes you up and says, what is your intention? Like, let's talk about intentions. And I want to tell you something that Marianne Williamson said that really struck me when it comes to intentions and talking to kids and trying to, you know, keep them focused. They learn what we do. Mm-hmm. In fact, I talked to a doctor on the Weekend Show a couple of weeks ago about this and children, and he said, children will do as well as their parents are doing a lot of times. They feel our anxiety. They feel, as much as we try to, you know, mask it, they feel our sadness, and that's okay. But we also need to find, you know, if that is your motivation to find resilience, let it be. I mean, nothing will motivate me more than what my children need. And sometimes my children need disappointment because they need to learn to deal with it. I don't want them growing up entitled or feeling like they're privileged or something. I want them to know their worth and know that they're strong enough to handle any of it. And Marianne Williamson said something that I think we all can relate to some degree, because I'm sure that we've all felt this with somebody in our lives at some point. She said, when our bottom line is what we can get out of something, we develop a skewed relationship to the things that matter. And she said, human beings were not created to sell to each other. There is a mentality among some people, a lot of people, and we may not even realize we're doing it sometimes, that we're going to do something because we think we're going to get something. Mm-hmm. And she's saying that's just not how we are wired. She said isolation is not healthy. And it was interesting because this struck me. She said solitude, yes. As moms, we know. Mm-hmm. Solitude. Yeah. But and the isolation and the separation, no. And we can be that buffer for our kids. Maybe they can't see, other kids, but you know what? We sit down and we play games with our kids. We go for walks. We go hiking. We do get out and do things just to let them know that life has not stopped, even though many of their activities have. And it stopped me in my tracks when Marianne said that, because she said, we were social distancing before we were social distancing. Mm-hmm. We would sit at a table at a date and be on our phones.
On our phone, totally.
Mm-hmm. In a movie theater, and we would be on our phones. This is a wake-up call to how damaging, how necessary we know social distancing is right now, but how to try to back away from that and find new ways to communicate and really, truly communicate. I mean, phones are not allowed at our dinner table. And phones need to be downstairs before they go to bed. They're not allowed to take them upstairs. That's waned a little bit, I admit, because they're talking to their friends and I'm tired and I want to go to bed. And they're talking to their friends. But we can be a kid again, That's when we're happy. And this was such a beautiful time to remember that at Christmas. Mm-hmm. To let yourself be a kid again, and you will relate to your kid.
Oh, that's such a good way of putting it. Christina McClellan, a good friend of mine who has been on IG Live, she just posted about Jesus Calling devotion and how today's was really significant. I know you do a daily devotion. It was about trusting in God in the midst of crisis. And actually, Christi, I don't know if you know this, but Christi is the reason I knew and now rely on the Jesus Calling devotion, because Christi, you gave that to me when I was going through a really hard time with my little one sick. And it brings me each day a refocus, a devotion to what matters. And, it's something that I know you do daily. Talk to me a little bit about what it brings to you. And, I think it's something that we can all learn from as we're trying to figure out how we want to spend this next year. Who knows? Next year could be hard too. It's not like 2020 is going to go away.
Yes. I mean, there
might be something that would help the people.
Right.
Yep. So what is it that the daily devotion does for you?
It reminds me that life is bigger than myself. Bob Goff actually said, you will make yourself, if you want to know how to make yourself miserable, think only of you. And he's right. Like, life is not here to cater to us, but that doesn't stop us from seeing the good in it. I learned, and I know you mentioned part of my book, but I wrote that book because I had been having conversations with people, oddly enough, that were having the same problem that I was having in my first marriage. And you feel a sense of shame when you have been abused, because you think, well, I let it happen, so I deserve it. I mean, there are all these emotions that go with it. And I ended up, my therapist said, you need to make lists of how it benefited you, which really sounds absurd. You go, what are you talking about? But this ties into the Jesus calling for me, because Jesus calling shows me gratitude for everything, and it shows me that I'm not alone. Like, it's not all on me to figure out. Sometimes we're just meant to sit and be still and learn to trust that God and you know, that higher power that is in control. And yes, he allows bad things to happen sometimes. And no, I will never have full understanding of that by any means, or even half understanding, but I have to be okay with that, because that's just the world that we live in, and not let that steal my joy. So when I was leaving my ex-husband, I said, I just don't want to take this pain with me. I just want to do something to make sure that I don't read somebody the wrong way again. Obviously, I don't want to make the same mistake I made in letting somebody in my life who was unhealthy for me. And my therapist said, okay, so I had to make a list, for instance, of the benefits of verbal abuse, which sounds insane, because even when she said it, I went, what? And she reminded me, I'm not saying what happened to you was okay. But the whole thought process is, if you can find out how it served you, you can really, truly let it go. And I ended up having 65 answers to that question.
I'm so curious. What is on that list?
Well, like, it made me more independent. I couldn't depend on him to pay bills. I couldn't depend on him to do anything, because he would get irate with people, so I had to do it all myself. It changed my idea of what marriage was. I used to think when I was young, oh, you know, they might not have it easy, but at least they're married and they're together. But if you're married to the wrong person, it's even worse. So it changed my idea of what relationships should look like. It taught me a lot about forgiveness, which is something that I talked to Lisa Turkhurst about. She's an author, New York Times bestselling author, who's going through a horrible time. Her husband had cheated on her. They had separated. They're now trying to reconcile, but she just wrote this book about forgiveness, forgiving what you can't forget. And it touches on, I'm reading it and I'm literally highlighting half the book, because it's so mirrors a lot of things that I've been through and what so many other people have been through. And that's one of the things I learned about forgiveness was, and there's things that she talked about as well, you can forgive someone and you can still cut them out of your life. I can wish you well and say, I'm not going to hang on to what you did to me. I do wish you well, but bye-bye. See you later. You have the right to do that. I always had this vision that forgiveness was, oh, hug, kiss, let's make up. It's not. Forgiveness is important to you. It's more important to you than it is to the other person. Because whether the other person ever acknowledges it or wanted it or needed it, that is not your business. This is one of those times when you are allowed to focus on you and say, you aren't healthy for me. I can live without this. And so that whole, because by the time I left that marriage, I really had forgiven him. I just wanted out. Like, you want the car? Fine, take the car. You want the ring back? You can take the ring back. All I wanted was my own air to breathe. And I'll never forget walking into my apartment, and I literally had nothing. I had a mattress and I had a television, and I was over the moon, ecstatic, coming home from work with nothing, because I had my own air to breathe and nobody was going to come at me. So when we think that forgiveness is saying to somebody, it's okay what you did to me, it's not. But it is saying, I don't need to live with this anymore. And you have not just the right, but you have the responsibility for the goodness of your own life to say and to recognize, if somebody is unhealthy, you don't need them to be in your life, and you don't need to apologize for that.
And that it's okay to still forgive them. What's the name of that book about forgiveness? Christi?
Forgiving What We Can't Forget. It's by Lisa Turkhurst, Terkeurst. She's amazing. And in fact, I talked to her and we aired it a couple weeks ago. I'll go ahead and post it because I have yet to post that on Instagram later today. But she really talked about and the other thing that I learned was about setting boundaries. I was never good at that. I was always like, let's all get along. Let's
Yep.
all,
People pleaser. Mm-hmm.
we don't like conflict. I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
really likes conflict? I guess some people do, but it wasn't me. I didn't recognize that you are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to, and this is something we teach our kids too. You're allowed to say, this is what's acceptable in my life and this is not. And if this person doesn't, you know, fall in line with that, and I'm not saying that people have to follow your rules, that's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about unhealthy behavior. You're allowed to say, I don't need this. And I tell this to my girls all the time, because we all know there are people we are going to be forced to be around that we either don't trust or we don't like, or we are very maybe feeling unforgiving of them. And I say, you can be civil and set a boundary. You can say hello to somebody you don't like. You can be around them with a group of friends and just know that that's not somebody you confide in. It's all about being grateful for who is around you that you trust. And that can be a very small circle. You don't need a big circle of people. I love that saying that says, as I get older, I've learned it's not as important to have lots of friends as it is to have true friends.
Yeah.
My circle has definitely been shrinking in my life. That's perfectly okay, and it's perfectly okay for you too.
I think that's such a good point. I keep thinking, after you've said this, how I don't want this thought to be lost on anyone. When you said my own air to breathe, how happy you were that you had your own air to breathe. I just think that that's something for anyone who is ever been in a relationship that's unhealthy, that may be in a relationship that's unhealthy. It's why your book is called Love Isn't Supposed to Hurt. It's you choose to live the life where you feel that you are breathing your own air, whether that's with someone, whether that's alone, whether it's, with your friends. If that's somebody that's not your friend, you want to cut them out of your life because that you don't feel you have that. I just think that that's something, it's just striking me as you said it, that I don't want it to be lost, because it just feels like so significant for you. It was a turning point in your own life. All of these people that you've mentioned are people that you have interviewed for the Reset, for Weekend New Day. Who would you say, I know this is probably hard because all of them have probably really impacted you, but who would you have said really is the one that hits you over the head the most, that has left you with something the most impactful this year?
I couldn't pick one. I want to read you something that Marianne Williamson said. When we get back to that, we're all looking to get something out of every relationship, and we need to look at our own intentions. She said, when you make the bottom line in life that you're trying to get something, that turns all human beings and human relationships into transactions. And that hit me, because I thought, I don't want to be that person. I don't want my intention to be to get something. We learn to give something. That Maya Angelou quote is probably the truest quote I've ever heard about how people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I tell my kids that all the time. Go be an encourager. Go make somebody feel good, because that is few and far between sometimes, it feels like today. And it's not. There are beautiful people out there doing far more than I'm doing for the world, but Marianne was talking about how for a certain age of us, we remember a time when it wasn't like this, when it wasn't, what can I get? Our concern was very genuinely for that person. The other one was probably Bob Goff, who, what was so funny about him, and I just highly recommend literally anything he's ever written is brilliant. But he was talking about how he is a go-goer, and he learned that he had to be home. And he said, and I got to see my grandson take his first step. And he said, well, I didn't look at it and go, well, I've seen better. And then he starts laughing. He goes, of course I did. And I said, oh my God, you took your first step. And then he And maybe that's just what heaven's asking us to do, is to just take a step, and maybe to take a step home.
Ah, Christi, you always, this is why throughout the last year, I've called Christi for a little bit of just like help.
And
uh,
I have called Lynn too, because believe me, I have meltdowns sometimes, just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? This is so awful. But the practice of gratitude, I mean, people say it sometimes. We say it so much, it just starts to sound like white noise. But there is real truth to looking at what you have, as opposed to always looking at what you don't have, and how it changes you. And that's what Jesus Calling did. When you mentioned it, it really does help you know you're not alone. You're not in this on your own, left to figure it out. It came to, my mother just had given me that book. I say it was by happenstance to some degree, but it came just a couple of months before a very, very difficult time in my life. And I can honestly say it transformed my life. And she's got a second version out as well, but I still read Jesus Calling. I mean, it's been 8 years, 7 years.
it
I
honestly feels like
app.
each
There,
day it knows exactly what you need to hear. It's unbelievable.
isn't it weird?
It's weird.
So, oh my gosh, I was just talking about
I know. I'm like, who's watching me? Who's watching me?
that smart TV again.
Exactly. I just love everything that you have given to all of us in this short time. I think that in just reading what everybody and the reset as well is invaluable. And hopefully we can all go into 2021 just trying to be better versions of ourselves and letting go and letting the ones that matter in. And you certainly are in that small group that I have in my life, and I'm so grateful for it. I love you, sweet friend.
Me too. I'm really blessed by you every day, and that is the truth. And I love to hear from all of these people on Instagram about, you know, what is your concern? Because I think people need a place to speak. But the kindness that I have seen in people has been so inspiring, you know, and I am really grateful to my producer, Adam, who, when I said, this is the reset and this is what I want to do, he said, do it. And it's been boom, 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 boom. And this week I'm actually talking to, her name's Juanita Rasmus, and she is the pastor for Beyonce's family. But she just wrote this book that is incredible. And it talks a lot about what we've been talking about today. So she's got one tactic, one strategy in particular that has really helped me find my gratitude, you know, when we have those moments, or just, you know, and just a one very, very super quick habit every day that she does. It's actually in the evening, and it changes your intention. It gives you clarity for what you really want. You know, do you really want the house because you just want a big house and you want to show it off to people? Do you just need more room? Or is there an insecurity that you think if you have this big house, you're going to have more worth, or you're going to be worth more? And so much of what we strive for, does it come from our intention to do good, or does it come from our own insecurities? And how can we flip that around?
That's such a good point. That's going to be on this weekend?
Yes. It's usually on Saturdays and the 8 o'clock, and end of the 8 o'clock hour. But she may be one of my very favorites so far.
Christi Paul, it has been so amazing talking to you. I love you, sweet friend. We will be watching on Saturday and Sunday, CNN New Day weekend. And I just can't wait to see you when we're back and give you a big hug. COVID or not, I'm giving you a hug.
I know. All of you, thank you for listening to us.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.